For as long as we've known about Alzheimer's disease, it's felt like this unstoppable force, a relentless one-way street of cognitive decline, with really no way to slow it down. But right now, for the first time ever, a new class of drugs is trying to change the course of the disease itself. And that sparked a ton of hope, but also some intense controversy. Okay, let's get into this new frontier. So, to really get why this is such a massive deal, you first have to understand the sheer scale of the problem. By 2025, that's the projected number of Americans, 65 and older, who will be living with Alzheimer's. It's a staggering figure. And it's not just a number, right? For every single person diagnosed, there's a whole universe of family and friends whose lives are turned upside down right alongside them. For decades, the story of treating Alzheimer's was all about damage control. You were just managing the fallout, not stopping the fire. We had drugs that could help with symptoms, but nothing that could touch the disease itself. Well, this is the moment that whole story started to shift. We've officially entered a brand new era. But to really appreciate just how big this shift is, you have to understand the battlefield. For more than 20 years, the hunt for an effective Alzheimer's drug has been, frankly, a graveyard of failed clinical trials. We're talking billions upon billions of dollars and countless hours of research that just led to one dead end after another. So the drugs we did have, they could offer these temporary cognitive boosts. They helped manage the symptoms for a little while, but they did absolutely nothing to alter that relentless march of destruction happening deep inside the brain. The disease itself just kept going, completely unchecked. So what changed? What's the big breakthrough? Well, it all hinges on one single, very powerful, and sometimes controversial idea about what actually causes Alzheimer's in the first place. For the last 25 years or so, research has been dominated by what's called the amyloid plaque theory. The basic idea is this: the disease gets started when this sticky little protein fragment called amyloid-β starts to build up in the brain. According to this hypothesis, that buildup is the first domino to fall. It's the thing that sets off this whole destructive chain reaction that eventually leads to dementia. So here's how the damage is supposed to unfold. It starts with those individual amyloid bits. Then they start to clump together, forming these dense, toxic plaques that get lodged between brain cells. These plaques are believed to be the trigger for a whole cascade of other problems. You get inflammation, you get another protein problem called tau tangles, and all of this eventually kills off brain cells and causes the cognitive decline that we all recognize as Alzheimer's disease. So if the plaques are the problem, the solution seems kind of obvious, right? Get rid of them. And that is exactly what this new generation of drugs was designed to do. And this marks a radical departure from everything that came before. And this right here really shows you the philosophical shift perfectly. For years, treatment was like bailing water from a sinking ship. This new approach, it's trying to plug the hole in the ship. The goal is no longer just to manage symptoms. It's to actually modify the disease by going after its biological root cause. And the tools for this job are a class of drugs called monoclonal antibodies. The easiest way to think of them is like a highly specialized cleanup crew. They're literally engineered to go into the brain, hunt down these amyloid plaques, bind to them, and tag them for removal by the brain's own immune system. 3 major drugs have come out of this strategy: aducanumab, lecanemab, and donanemab. And what's wild is that they all succeeded spectacularly at their main job. They are all incredibly effective at clearing amyloid plaques from the brain. But as you can see, their journeys after that have been very, very different. And that's because proving you can clear plaques is one thing, but proving that it actually helps patients and is safe enough to be worth it, well, that's another thing entirely. And this gets us to the absolute core of the debate around these drugs: the risk versus the reward. I mean, this is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If you take the plaques away, does a patient's cognitive decline actually slow down in a way that matters to them and to their families in their daily lives? And is it worth the potential risks? The biggest risk is a side effect known by the acronym ARIA. It stands for amyloid-related imaging abnormalities. What happens is, as the drug mobilizes and clears out all that amyloid, it can cause temporary inflammation that leads to swelling or even small bleeds in the brain, all of which are visible on an MRI. And listen, this isn't some minor risk. Take donanemab, for instance. In its clinical trial, nearly a quarter of the patients who got the drug developed brain swelling.
Compare that to just 2% in the placebo group. Now, while most cases are mild and people don't even feel it, it is a serious concern that requires constant monitoring. So that's the risk. Now, what about the reward? Well, in its big trial, lecanemab slowed cognitive decline by 27% compared to a placebo over 18 months. Okay, that number is statistically significant. It proved the drug was having a real effect. But the whole debate is about whether that effect is actually clinically meaningful. And that leads us to this really powerful conclusion from a recent meta-analysis. It found that the benefits they saw in the trials for all three of these drugs, well, they fell below the threshold of what's considered a minimal, clinically important difference. To put it simply, that means the average patient or their caregiver might not actually notice that modest slowing of decline in their day-to-day life.
And yet, despite all these very real limitations and very real debates, there is no question that these drugs have fundamentally changed the game. They've forced the entire medical field to completely rethink how we diagnose, manage, and treat Alzheimer's disease. This new era is being called precision neurology, because these are not drugs you can just give to anyone with dementia. No way. It requires this highly targeted and individualized approach, from figuring out who is even a candidate to carefully monitoring them every step of the way. So, who is eligible? Well, first, you need proof. A PET scan or a spinal fluid test has to confirm you actually have amyloid plaques. Second, you have to be in the very early stages of the disease. Third, genetic screening is recommended because a specific gene, APOE4, dramatically increases the risk of those side effects. And finally, patients have to be willing and able to get frequent MRI scans to watch out for them. And on top of all those medical hurdles, there are huge practical ones. The drug itself costs over $26,000 a year. Even with something like Medicare, patients can face thousands in out-of-pocket costs. And this all relies on an infrastructure of specialized centers for PET scans, IV infusions, and MRIs that, let's be honest, simply doesn't exist in many parts of the country. Which leaves us right here. These drugs have proven we can target the biology of Alzheimer's. They represent a monumental scientific achievement, a pivotal first step. But the question that remains is a big one. Is clearing amyloid plaques the final answer to conquering this disease? Or is it just the end of the beginning of a much, much longer war?